May the Creator bless his water, may he bless his coming and going, may his passage cleanse the world, may he preserve the world for his people. This is a prayer recited by the native inhabitants of Arrakis, a planet also known as Dune. The Fremen utter this blessing as the giant sandworms break through the surface of the sand, spreading valuable spice melange across the desert planet. This psychedelic substance has many uses, from prolonging life to enhancing mental abilities. By ingesting spice, guild navigators can travel through deep space, and the Bene Gesserit gain impressive powers. And as the creators of this valuable substance, the sandworms, also known as Shai Hulud, are considered the most important organisms in the universe. Of course, this is not the universe we know, but the one created by Frank Herbert in the world of science fiction Dune. This world extends far beyond the pages and captures the hearts and minds of millions of fans worldwide. Many of them have spent much time pondering the details of the book, struggling with the plot, and imagining life on such a harsh planet. And although Herbert gave fans plenty to think about, there are many unknowns, including details about the biology of the most famous creatures in the universe. What we do know is that sandworms are among the largest animals in the universe. Their sizes range from 100 to over 400 meters in length, with some reports of worms reaching half leagues or around 2,500 meters. Their skin consists of a series of overlapping scales, each approximately 1 to 3 meters wide, creating a strong, impermeable armor that protects the sandworm from the abrasive surrounding sand. And each segment of their body is capable of life on its own. Their mouths can expand to 80 meters in diameter and are lined with crystalline teeth capable of swallowing a human and a machine. If you're lucky, you may notice their approach and make an attempt to escape. They often induce dry lightning due to static electricity discharge, and the scent of spice fills the air. Then the sand begins to tremble, and by then it may be too late. And despite being such a huge creature, they start their life on a much smaller scale. Their first stage of life is sand plankton, microscopic organisms that feed on spice melange on the desert surface. They are eaten by sandworms, but they also bury themselves in the sand and transform into sand trout, also known as little makers. At this stage, they are described by Herbert as half plant, half animal. They create water pockets in the sand, which, mixed with their bile, become pre-mass. They also emit gases that ultimately accumulate and lead to spice blows, bringing pre-mass to the surface, often during deadly eruptions. The sun and air turn it into spice. Although many sand trout perish during these eruptions, some survive and grow into giant sandworms. While this background information is sufficient for a series of novels, it lacks specific details explaining the unusual biology of the sandworm. Fortunately, dedicated Herbert fans span all professions, including biologists, and some have spent considerable time trying to fill the gaps left by Herbert, using their knowledge of animals here on Earth. One of the main questions many have pondered is how they can be so large. On Earth, the largest terrestrial animal is considered to be the Argentinosaurus. Although a complete skeleton has not yet been discovered, estimates based on available fossils place it at 37 to 40 meters in length and 90 to 100 tons in weight. In the sea, animals can be even larger as their weight is partially supported by water, so the largest animal ever to live on Earth lives in the ocean. The blue whale can reach lengths of up to 33 meters and weigh 180 metric tons, but the sandworm still surpasses them both. So is it possible for an animal to reach such a size? Technically, it is possible, but there are biological and mechanical obstacles that the animal needs to overcome. Firstly, it's the structural support system. If a blue whale measuring 33 meters weighs 180 metric tons, one can only imagine how much a 400x80 meter sandworm would weigh. To bear such weight and move, especially at the high speeds known for these giants, an incredibly strong skeletal system is required. Although the description of sandworms resembles Earth's annelids, which include worms or possibly arthropods like centipedes, it would be highly unlikely for one of these types of animals to reach the colossal size of a sandworm. Annelids have a hydrostatic skeleton that maintains their shape by maintaining water or fluid under constant pressure, which would be impossible to sustain on a dry desert planet. Arthropods have a hard exoskeleton, but as they molt with growth, this makes them vulnerable until the new exoskeleton hardens. Scientists believe that there is a size limit for animals with an exoskeleton, the largest in the world being the Japanese spider crab, which is only 3.5 meters wide. Additionally, the exoskeleton would need to be incredibly thick to support all their mass, leaving little room for other vital body parts such as organs. Instead, the sandworm likely has an internal skeletal structure and is more akin to a serpent, which aligns with its scaly exterior appearance. Since bones are made of living tissue, they grow as the animal grows, theoretically allowing sandworms to continuously grow. However, there is a structural consideration that may hinder this in physics. The longer the beam, the more it will bend. For example, a 5 cm beam will bend 1,300 times less than a 2-meter beam with the same cross-section. To avoid bending, the bones of larger animals are more massive and heavier, making up a larger portion of the animal's total mass. To understand this, scientists estimate that the bones of a small sandworm would account for about 40% of its mass, compared to approximately 18% for the average human. This would make it impossible for sandworms to move if they were made of calcium, like our bones, but they could be made of something entirely different. In a 2007 essay, a biologist named Sale Hetchel speculated that sandworms should have bones made of something stronger than calcium, such as metal, which would reduce their diameter and, depending on the metal, their weight. However, they would need a diet rich in metals to produce metallic bones, so perhaps the sand on Arrakis contains more metals than the sand here on Earth, or the collectors, known for their diet, provide them with sufficient amounts of these metals. But even with all the structural support in the world, there's another problem. How does such a gigantic creature regulate its body temperature? As muscles contract and relax, they generate heat, which is typically dissipated into a cooler environment through the skin. If this doesn't happen, body temperature rises to dangerous levels, leading to heat stroke or even death. But how do you dissipate internal heat if you live in an environment where the ambient temperature is much higher than yours? The temperature of the sand on Arrakis can reach 76 deg C, or 170 deg. Additionally, the sandworm's extra-large muscles and organs generate a lot of internal heat, and the unforgiving desert environment of Arrakis makes it incredibly difficult for its dissipation. On Earth, many animals have developed ways to regulate their body temperature. This includes mechanisms like flat appendages that can act as heat exchangers, like the ears of elephants. These methods are especially important for large animals, which have a proportionally larger volume to surface area ratio than small animals. Other animals on Earth resort to sweating to keep cool, but there's one big problem with this, and the sandworms from Dune die from water. In fact, they are not water-based organisms at all. It is implied that they are not even carbon-based life forms. The Ecology Appendix mentions that carbon-based proteins are incompatible and toxic to them, and since water is toxic to them, sweating is out of the question. So maybe they use evaporative cooling with a liquid other than water, or maybe, as a non-water-based organism and not even a carbon-based organism, they can withstand the heat. Maybe they even need it. In the book, there are described hot chemical furnaces boiling inside the worm, so perhaps they have a purpose for their internal heat. For example, it could be used to drive chemical reactions in their bodies. Our own organisms require a certain temperature for enzyme function. These are proteins that accelerate chemical reactions, and they usually work best at 37 degrees C, whereas earthly proteins denature at approximately 40 degrees C. Perhaps sandworms are equipped with proteins or comparable unknown molecules that require conditions similar to a furnace. These reactions presumably create the oxygen supply on the planet. On Earth, plants create oxygen through photosynthesis. In this process, they absorb carbon dioxide and water using solar energy to create sugars and carbohydrates. These long chains of molecules consisting of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen release the excess oxygen atom into the atmosphere. Arrakis currently lacks abundant plants but still contains enough oxygen to support life. Noticing this feature in the novel, the planet's ecologist Pardo Kynes predicted the existence of an underground organism capable of producing oxygen. It turned out to be the sand trout, but since they live underground, they cannot use solar energy to produce oxygen. How do they do it? Although Herbert described them as semi-plant, semi-animal creatures, fans speculated that they actually have more in common with bacteria, specifically chemotrophic bacteria, which produce oxygen without the sun. They are also known as extremophils because they live in harsh conditions, such as deep-sea vents. They generate energy by oxidizing chemical substances such as hydrogen sulfide, methane, and ammonia, and then use this energy, water obtained in the oxidation process, and carbon dioxide to create sugars and carbohydrates, releasing oxygen. Presumably some of the same chemical substances are also emitted from underground vents on Arrakis, so perhaps sand trouts can use them similarly and produce oxygen as a byproduct. But being a large organism, the sand trout most likely needs something to eat to produce the pre-spice mass. It is said that sand plankton eats spice and sandworms consume sand plankton. So what about the sand trout as a producer of pre-spice mass? It wouldn't make sense for them to eat it too, so perhaps another organism is involved here, one that both feeds the sand trout and helps it create the pre-spice mass. In his essay, biologist Dr. Hatchell pointed out that most of Earth's exotic compounds come from plants, bacteria, and fungi. So if the same is true for Arrakis, this could explain the source of the pre-spice mass. There are many examples of symbiotic relationships between these types of organisms and animals. One of the most well-known examples is leafcutter ants. These ants act as farmers for certain species of fungi. They bring leaf pieces into their underground nests and keep them moist for the fungus to start growing on them. After the fungus digests the cellulose in the leaves, which the ants cannot do themselves, they eat it. So perhaps underground in the pockets of sand trout, fungi grow. This could serve them as food as well as a source of pre-spice mass. And while all these theories have their problems, they offer us a fascinating look at the animals of this world. Whatever the answer may be, sandworms will continue to be one of the most amazing creatures in the universe.